This is The Party with Serene
and Pearl.
Get it right, Poddy.
Well, Serene and I are pretty enthralled today because we have with us in the studio in person, Jordan Rubin. And welcome, Jordan.
Thanks for having me.
We're total fangirling too because Jordan Rubin was like the Maker's Diet was like the first book that we picked up that we really were like, oh my goodness, this isn't just a bunch of wisdom of man. This is health with so much grounding to it. And we ate that book up totally. And
so we've really followed you from the 90s. Did that book come out in the 90s, Jordan?
No, it certainly seems like it. 2003 it was written. So we're about 20 years since the publication.
Okay, but didn't you have a version of it first? And we're going to read your bio. But if anyone's just listening, Jordan's been around in the health movement for many decades.
Yes.
I'm not trying to age you.
And we're allowed to say that you were the founder of all of those products that are still in all your health food stores today.
Garden of Life.
Garden of Life.
Back in those days. So that was, Garden of Life was the late 90s. My first book, Patient Heal Thyself, was in 2002, and I talked about the Maker's Diet. So that may have been
that was the one.
What started, where health food stores were giving it out.
Yeah.
And
it had the picture of you on the front, you healthy
the yellow
and
book.
you sick.
Yes.
Yeah, I got that one.
So all our nerdy listeners and viewers here, if you've followed health for any amount of time, you'll know who Jordan Rubin is. If he's new to you, Serene, would you like to read Jordan's bio?
Yes. Jordan Rubin is regarded by many as the most respected and beloved natural health expert in America. His personal account of his battle and triumph over Crohn's disease has resonated with millions around the world and is one of the most dramatic natural health stories ever told. A successful entrepreneur, the founder of Ancient Nutrition, New York Times best-selling author, international motivational speaker, and television personality, Jordan's message of health and wellness is a beacon to the masses who are looking for answers to help take control of their health. And
Go ahead.
No, you
Serene.
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say Ancient Nutrition. I think people are pretty familiar with that because many people know Dr. Josh Axe. And so did you partner with him on that company?
Yes. Yeah. So the spring of 2016, Ancient Nutrition started. Prior to that was my initial adventure into regenerative farming and food and beverages. And then prior to that, Garden of Life. And prior to that, very sick college student who God put on the right path. And really for the last 28 years, I've been sharing this same message. What's great is today people are talking about it from all walks of life. I would have never thought that health and wellness, or what we'd call natural health, would be on the consciousness of America, if not the world. So we were talking about this off the air. We're going to experience a renaissance in natural health and wellness where chiropractic is going to be considered the norm. I believe insurance companies are going to start paying for the therapies and some of the gadgets and gizmos that we're all using, right? And the food we
I want to
eat.
get some red light therapy for food.
Yes, and subsidizing the right behavior. How about that?
No, this is so exciting. And you've kind of been heralding this for many decades, but can I just go back, if people aren't familiar with your story, when I remember when I read The Maker's Diet, and you had a picture of yourself in there, and I remember you were kind of on your deathbed, right? Skin and bones. You had was it a very, very acute case of Crohn's, or what was it? But were you kind of like one of those cases that you could have passed?
Absolutely. And what's worse, I wished I did. Now, just to be clear, I was not looking back what you'd call suicidal, but I didn't want to live anymore. I wanted to be home with Jesus. And as a man of faith at the time, a young man of faith, I didn't come to know the Lord due to my tragedy, but my relationship deepened in a way that now I'm glad about, but I wouldn't have wished it on my worst enemy. So to answer your question, Pearl, I had a very severe case of inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's colitis, and this was in a day before you would see commercials for anti-inflammatory or immune suppressive drugs for Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. And if I watch a sporting event on TV, I see 5 of those. Back when I was diagnosed, hardly anyone had heard of it, which should be scary to you listening, because that means we've had an increase probably of 10-fold in the last nearly 30 years. So when I was diagnosed, the challenge with my condition is I had wasting disease accompany it. So I am just about 200 pounds now. I was 104 pounds. I'm 6 feet tall. That's short when it comes to your families, but when it comes to me,
It comes to that weight.
I was almost half of my weight. I was dealing with 18 other related illnesses in a wheelchair, and I was sick every single day with no improvement. So when you say acute versus chronic, 2 years, the same level of sickness every day, which was in the bathroom 13 to 30 times a day. And keep in mind, when you're 19 years old, if you break your arm, you're fine to have that be the top of a prayer request list. But when your symptoms are bloody diarrhea, it's a little challenging.
Right.
And I looked and felt like I was trapped in a prison that was my own body. And so
hard at 19 too, as a guy. I had to watch my son get sick at around that same time, and it's hard. At 19, you're meant to be in your prime. You're meant to be filling out, not wasting away. That must have been super hard emotionally.
It was, and I wore the, I would say, weight of my parents and friends and loved ones who were praying for me, checking in on me, and I just never had anything good to share. And this was despite visiting 69 medical experts around the world. I'm talking about going to Germany for venous flytrap IV infusions, to England for what at the time I referred to as fetal sheep cell injections, but they were what we would know as the primitive version of stem cell therapy. But trying everything you can think of, some now humorous therapies that I won't talk about much, but it is the epitome of desperate times requires desperate measures. But what's really important for people to know is that despite the fact that I had no joy, no happiness, I didn't smile for a year on end. I mean, you could, and I'm kind of I like to think of myself as a life of the party kind of guy. Like last night at dinner, I have 6 children, but the 4 that are in the house, I orchestrated this contest where everybody could sing a song a cappella and have everybody vote on their performance, mainly so that I could sing one song, and then as the winner, I could sing a second song. So they figured that out pretty quickly. But I love to have a good time. I've always been someone who was a little bit of a class clown, and so that was sucked from me. And I just was buried so deep, and the hope that I had was founded in my relationship with God, but I also had hope in all of these therapies that promised me the world. We cured everybody. If you come to Germany, if you go to England, if you go to Mexico, if you try this contraption, you'll be healed. And then failure after failure after failure. And I remember having a day when it was one of my lowest. I had a friend who wanted to come visit me, and it was a female friend who I had taken to prom, and I didn't want her to come to see me looking like a concentration camp victim. And she came anyway. And at this point, my muscles were so weak that the ocular muscles in my eyes couldn't focus. I couldn't even read the Bible much. And so I remember her reading the Bible to me. And it was around this time where my previous favorite scripture, which got me through this journey, Hebrews 11:1, which is, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. It really helped me understand that we have to have faith beyond our circumstances. Hebrews 11:6 says, without faith, it is impossible to please him. Flipping over to Romans, it says, faith comes by hearing the word of God, the word of Christ. And then the toughest scripture in James, faith without works or action is dead. And I was like many people today in that I had every excuse in the book. I'm bedridden. I had to medically withdraw from college. I'm a college dropout. I don't want anyone to come visit me, even if they did. When I go out in public in a wheelchair, people step back from me because they may think I have something contagious. I look like I had AIDS, at late stage. Some people, they have broken marriage. They have children that are in a mess. They're financially on the edge of bankruptcy or worse. And so people in that state or deathly ill, they don't think that God intends those individuals or us to take that step of faith, but it couldn't be further from the truth. And that stimulated me to walk 7 steps to this closet in my parents' home and ask my mom to take my picture. Now, this was 95, so we didn't have digital cameras. We didn't have Photoshop. And I didn't have enough energy to stand there for long because I would often black out when I would walk to the
Is that the
area.
picture in that book?
It is.
The Maker's
What a
Diet?
faith step.
And it was, and my mom almost begged me not to take the picture. I was there in my boxer shorts. I had this beard, not because it was fashionable, but I didn't have the strength to shave, and I couldn't afford to lose any blood. I mean, think about that for a reason to grow a beard. Wow. And my mom said, Jordan, why do you insist I take this picture? Can't we wait till you're better? And I said, Mom, the world's not going to believe what God's about to do in my life.
Got goosebumps.
Now, I would love to tell everybody who's struggling here that I woke up the next morning well, and that would have been an awesome story, but it took almost a year later, more hospitalizations, more horror stories, but I met a man by telephone who told me that if I would follow a diet based on the Bible, I could be well. And I had faith, and now based on that infusion from this man named Bud, I had hope. And at that point, I was living in South Florida, traveled to California to live with this man in a wheelchair. And 40 days later, I went from death to life. And 12 weeks later was that after picture that people can look online right now if they want to look up my name, Jordan Rubin, and images. You can see before and after picture. Now, there is another Jordan Rubin online. He writes horror movies. So my kids refer to him as the bad Jordan Rubin, and we think his kids refer to me as the weird Jordan Rubin.
Do you know what really was so influential in my life about your whole story was I was a raw food plant vegan, right? I'm like, the ultimate diet was probably like the diet in the Garden of Eden, and it was just all of the vegetables and all of the plants, and meat is probably like second best, and it's because of the fall of man and blah, blah, blah. And this was all kind of indoctrination in my head. But then your whole story was about eating the food groups, eating clean sources of grass-fed meat, eating clean sources of whole, grass-fed dairy, and just the whole gamut of provision
Fermented foods
from the
was
Father,
big, yeah.
major fermented foods. And it was just so eye-opening to me as a Bible believer. Oh my goodness, these were the foods I was told to stay away from because they kind of clog your body up. But these were the foods that were not only healing, but they were like the bricks and mortar to just build your strength back up. And it was what I needed to get out of a bondage of just like, the only thing that's cleansing and really healthy is just plants.
Yeah, so part of our story, really, your story was part of our story.
Delivered me from
Jordan.
a bunch of strongholds.
So, millions of women have gotten healthy with our Trim Healthy plan, but indirectly, you had something to do with that.
Right.
Your story did.
Wow.
And I don't know if you know that, but
You need to add Serene to my bio next time, liberator of vegans.
Yes, liberate. You were
We've just offended a few people, but I have heard that story many times, and I would bet that almost everyone who, I would say, entered into the health and wellness movement 10, 20, 30 years ago had a journey that veganism or plant-based was a part of it. I am second generation natural health, and when I was born, my parents they didn't call it vegan because that term wasn't there, but they were vegetarians at the time. My dad was in naturopathic college. They were thin as a rail. Yeah. And then my mom, during pregnancy, just craved chicken because that's what the body needs. Yeah. Now, we will do a podcast in the future next year where we will talk about what Adam and Eve ate in the garden and what those fruits and vegetables would have been and how we get back to that tree of life level of health. But for now, in the state we're in, animal foods are a big part of it. And if they weren't, God wouldn't have devoted the most part of 2 chapters of the Bible, Leviticus 11, Deuteronomy 14. Jesus wouldn't have eaten fish every time he was mentioned eating anything. And then we can only assume that he ate lamb in what we would call the Last Supper, which was the preparation evening before the Passover. So there is no doubt in my mind that an omnivorous diet is the right diet. I don't believe a carnivore diet is ideal.
I agree.
I don't believe a vegan diet is ideal. Do I think there are times when people could benefit from a plant-based diet for a week or two? Absolutely. And do I think people could benefit from an all-meat diet for a short period of time? Absolutely. But in between there is a real food, biblically based diet that we find the most nutritious version of each food. Yeah. And I remember learning about raw milk when I first was introduced to this biblical diet. And it was so simple for me because more or less, I understood that if God wanted milk to be pasteurized, homogenized, and skimmed, he would have put a cream separator and a pasteurizer on the udder of a cow, goat, or a sheep. How did Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob live with their raw milk if pasteurization is necessary?
Yeah.
How did people like our biblical forefathers raise animals only, and they didn't even stay long enough to plant crops at every season? Now, we know they did some because the great Psalm says, and Isaac planted a field and in the due seasons reaped 100-fold. So there were times where you had a season or two, but primarily they ate from the animals.
Yeah.
And so
No,
I
they
learned
did,
about
but
all of
let
that.
me put, in just friendly debate back and forth here, because that's what we do when we sit down. And we've got to get to this conversation we had at your farm. But I would say they did make butter, though, because remember when the angel of the Lord came down and Abraham made him a meal? Yeah, butter, but that meant there was some skim milk, and I believe they fermented that probably to keep it.
I
Because
bet
they
they
probably
fed the animals with it.
You think?
Because here's the thing, fat was so important in Scripture. Think about it. The fat, if you do well and follow God, you will eat the fat of the land. Oil and fat were so important. What did God want in his offerings? Fatty portions and oil. So I don't believe they would have consumed skim milk. Maybe they used it as a culture starter, but I think what you're referring to as buttermilk would have either been used in recipes or given to animals because they needed to be fed. Now, not pigs, but other animals. But that we'll never know until
yeah.
this
But I
side of
just
heaven.
love-
That's a
and
great question, Pearl. Great
I
thought.
love how you mentioned that scripture in Deuteronomy. And I don't know if it was the exact one, but it was after being seeded by your whole testimony of health being restored to you by eating of all of the gifts that the Creator has put here on the earth and blessed as food. I was in a whole lot of trouble, like major sarcopenia after having baby after baby on this raw plant vegan diet. And I just peeled the Bible open like, God, I need your practical help here, not just spiritual help. And it was like Deuteronomy, that scripture that says, I give you the harvest of the field, the blood of the grape, the milk of the goat, the fat of the ram. It was all there. It was so poetic. And it went boom into my soul like, it's all here, and it's all about inclusion. It's not about exclusion, and that's what I'd always done, excluded and called something like I personally demonized it when it was a gift from the Father. So I love the whole thing about balance.
I think that's Deuteronomy 32:14. Maybe that's when God was talking about all the blessings he gave Israel, and then Jeshurun, which is the only time Israel was referred to that, grew fat and kicked because they had everything they needed, and then they walked away from God. But before that, it talks about all the blessings, the germ of the wheat, the blood of the grape. It's amazing. And so I don't look at diet as a religion. The problem with certain diets today, people don't say they're on a plant-based diet. They say, I am a vegan. Think about it, or I am a carnivore.
Their
And I think
identity.
for us, we're children of God, and he has given us foods that are amazing for our bodies, and he's given us a way to prepare and preserve them that make them even healthier. Imagine that. We talked about briefly a trip I had to Australia. One of the people who taught me the most about fermentation, I remember learning from him. He was actually a baker in Australia, but he learned about fermented foods and had these special probiotics and these ingredients. And in 1999, he explained to me that refrigeration was the worst invention for man. And it says that he said something to the effect of fermentation is poor man's refrigeration for a rich man's health. So the way that people throughout history had to preserve foods, the way that they would make what we would call sauces or condiments, they actually made foods healthier. Today, preservatives, by and large, are unhealthy.
Yeah.
And so we have just come very far from the beginning. But for me to get well, I had to go back to foundational eating.
Yes.
It was an omnivorous diet. I learned about heirloom sourdough grains. I
Yes.
consumed raw dairy. I consumed grass-fed meat before it was a thing or was really cool. I consumed carrot juice and mixed it with cream to get all the nutrients out. And it reminded me of when I was in Germany, wondering why they would put cream in the carrot juice. And they may not realize that fat
soluble.
helps the fat-soluble beta-carotene precursor of vitamin A work better. But we did things back in the day that made us healthier, and we do things today that are quite the opposite.
Well, I feel like that's kind of a good segue into what we kind of want to talk about with you today. We want to pick your brain about things because, we got a chance to go to your farm, which is close by here, the hilltop, and it's really incredible. We kind of sat there and had a delicious lunch, things from your farm. It was all like, growing there. And then you took us for a walk around it, and you're doing something quite spectacular. I think it's kind of like a life project.
Don't take your children to the zoo. Take your children to Jordan Rubin's farm, because I'm telling you
it's not open to the public.
It's not open, but I'm just saying, if you had a perfect world and there were tickets to be sold and you could go, the deal is there is water buffalo and all kinds of different breeds of sheep and goats, and then there's the original cow from India. What is that thing called?
Well, it's a gyr cow,
gyr.
but the word is zebu in Afrikaans. So it's a cow with floppy ears and a hump. I remember first seeing them, and I saw a photo, and I asked someone, did a camel breed with a rabbit? I mean, they're very different looking, but this is what you would have in the Middle East. This is what the Bible referred to as a kine, Kine.
Yes. Yeah, the milk of the kine.
And we're used to the black and white Chick-fil-A cow, as I call it. And on another show, we can talk about the dangers of modern milk because of that A1, A2, all this stuff. So,
but anyway,
but there's all kinds of flapping creatures too, and there's and all of their poop goes into this most perfect marinade for the soil. And then you get compost from everywhere, right?
I've never heard poop and marinade used in the same
You're
sentence.
doing something different, right? That no one really else has done before. Because of your history, if I may talk for you, from what I gathered from that day, your history of healing was going back to the ancient ways, right? And so really, you're trying to take farming back to the ancient ways to make things like they were again. Am I right?
You're absolutely right.
Because we went down the other day and just to look at some plants there. And your friend Todd, who runs the place, he said that they tested pristine organic turmeric, and then your regenerative organic turmeric. And it was, you have to tell me the number. It was like so many hundreds more percentage of like nutrients and just bioflavonoid rich. It was just so impressive. What are the numbers on that again?
It depends. Some could be 8 times, some could be 50% more.
It's amazing.
And we're in Tennessee, where turmeric doesn't exactly grow like Costa Rica or Hawaii or Nicaragua or Peru. So we're seeing some great results. We're still early. We're not even in year 3 of our 14-year project, but my personal mission statement today, and I think it's been this way for years, but I haven't articulated it before the last few, but it is to heal the planet, feed the world, and eradicate disease. Now, when I talk about products and things, I'll say transform health to make it a little milder, but I believe that all of the world's problems can be solved in a garden, and I believe there were no problems in the garden. Mm-hmm. So we like to talk a lot about the Garden of Eden. There's a lot of interesting theological and even natural health anecdotes, but at the end of the day, our journey is from one garden to a final garden, which is also called paradise. And I think it's our duty to help steward our resources until that time. And it amazes me that in our very political world, it seems like environmental stewardship is at odds with political parties. At the end of the day, we need to be stewards like Adam and Eve were. Jesus is the second Adam. And in that, there's some level of giving us those keys of agriculture back so that we can, I don't want to say recreate the garden, but we can move towards an earth that is the way God intended it.
In a nutshell, what's wrong with topsoil? Because you're trying to do something distinctly different with topsoil.
It's hardly thick, right?
What's wrong with it is it's gone. And I'll give you an example. So I live in a neighborhood I just looked 55 minutes from here, and they were excavating the neighbor's lot. Now, this is a subdivision. Now, we have a farm. I have 2 farms, and I can always go there, but my wife also likes subdivisions, the suburbs. Yeah. So this was a great opportunity because they were excavating the yard or lot next to me. This used to be a farm, just like every property in Middle Tennessee. There was 0 discernible topsoil. I took photos up and down, 0, not what I could see with the naked eye, maybe a few millimeters. And I think I told you all this, and I love to share these old agricultural anecdotes, but I've asked people many times why we bury someone 6 feet under, and hardly anybody knows why. But everyone knows how many feet you bury somebody.
Yeah.
in the world, and particularly in America, the topsoil was 4 to 6 feet deep. And if you would bury somebody 4 feet deep, the topsoil moves. It's like a sponge. You literally have Aunt Mildred and Uncle Sam bumping caskets because that's how malleable, moldable, and squeezable the soil was. Today, it is rock and clay and dead. And the fact that we see trees growing out of rocks just shows how miraculous God's power is in his creation. But topsoil is how we derive nutrients. It's how we purify water. It is our inheritance. People came to America as an agrarian nation. And over the last 100 years, we have eroded or washed away more topsoil than 50% of what we've ever had. And so to be able to build it and regenerate it, we have goals that are very, I would say, difficult to obtain. It takes, according to scientists, 500 years to rebuild 1 inch of topsoil. We want to put a system together that will build an inch every year. Now, we haven't gotten there yet, but that's what we're working towards.
You have been doing some amazing things at that farm, though. You did tell me that the topsoil is growing exponentially.
Absolutely.
In your kind of it's a test farm,
It
right?
is. It is.
And you're
in
doing
just a couple of
something
years.
that in a couple
And
of years.
I remember talking to you because I'm a little bit of a greenie at heart. You know, my family can't stand it because I save every bit of plastic straw, plastic lid, plastic everything, and I shove them into plastic bags and stick them in a back room of my house, hoping one day I have the time to go take them to recycle. But
Well,
then,
you don't know if they'll
my
be
family
recycled.
says they don't recycle anyway, and then they end up in the ocean, and you're not doing any good. But I'm like, at least I'm doing my part, whatever. And you're like, the best thing you can do for the earth is actually just compost. Like, instead of worrying about throwing away your plastic, which, eventually we should worry about it, but because of the way the world's set up, it may end up in the ocean anyway. But if we just take all our carrot tops and our potato peels and everything, we just throw in the garbage. Most people do in the city, and we actually compost it and put back into the earth. That's how we do our part, right?
It's true. And one of the best things that we do at what we call Heal the Planet Farm is go to local purveyors of foods, particularly organic foods like restaurants we love, Urban Market, etc. And we say, how would you like to be food waste free? Because I would sit at Urban Market and I'd watch people throw away like 3/4 of their salad, all this wonderful food that I know that my birds would like to eat, chickens, ducks, and turkeys. I know the worms would like to eat them and the bacteria would. So we have dumped millions of pounds of produce, meat, dairy onto our soil to feed our birds. We have 3,000 chickens, ducks, and turkeys. And ultimately, we are growing plants from the seeds from the food waste. Think about they get a little speck in their blackberry container and they want to dump it. We're going to have in the next few years orchards that just miraculously sprung up.
This should be all over the place.
Everywhere.
Because people are throwing it in plastic trash where it can't break down.
Yes.
Can you imagine if people were putting it back on the earth?
So that day that we sat around the table at your farm and we were kind of blown away and thinking about, what you're doing here, we talked about the ancient ways and, people have always come to Serene and I and talked about, Trim Healthy Mama should have supplements and it just never felt right at that time. But that day we started talking about ancient ways and we started talking about organs and the things that people groups have been doing for thousands of years as the healers,
or even not far back as that, but even our parents were raised nose to tail. I mean, they would eat, my grandfather was an incredible hunter, and they would put away, they had nights of the week where they ate the duodenum, what they call it, sweet bread or whatever.
And you are actually a fountain of knowledge of that, and your farm regenerates, you're all about regenerative farming, so regenerative organs. And Serena and I, that very day, we decided if we were going to bring supplements, we were going to bring the ancient pathways back to them, not just, hey, this isolated synthetic supplement, here's your multi, but do something that is true healing. And since that time, we've been able to source some things from what you do. And I just thought today we wanted to pick your brain about some things that are coming back that you've helped bring back, like meat organs. Why?
Well, I have often said in my books and any type of media that I've done, any content, food is the key. Your diet is the key. Anything you supplement with, which often is in the palm of your hand versus the food we eat, we could hold in our arms if we try. So think about that. The supplement amounts you consume are relatively small. The word supplement means in addition to, and if you're going to consume a supplement, it should be something that belongs in our diet that we either don't consume, won't consume, or don't get enough of. And organs, I would say, are number one. If you ask Dr. Josh Axe, myself, and many others, if we had one supplement of a superfood that was indispensable, what would it be? And I think it's organs. And they were part of our diet throughout history. You don't have to go back 3 generations, usually 1 or 2. And our parents and our grandparents consumed organs every week, liver and onions. Or you mentioned sweetbread, which is pancreas or thymus. What you were calling the duodenum in Jewish, it's kishkas. It's haggis in Scottish. And it's repulsive, let's face it, but everyone has a word for it because they could not afford to waste the nutrition, period. You had to eat nose to tail. You received collagen because of the bones that you either gnawed on or made soup or stock or bone broth. The organs were essential. Tongue, like I have a Jewish background, and every time there was any occasion, they served cow's tongue, and they had liverwurst, which was like a liver pate. All of this was common. My grandmother on my dad's side had pernicious anemia, and in the hospital, she was given raw liver. And on the other side of my dad's family, his grandfather was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and visited a German scientist and doctor named Max Gerson, and he was treated with raw liver along with juices.
Wow.
I mean, that's on the same side of my family. Organs were used as medicine. On all sides, they were used as part of our common diet. When you grow up eating muscle meat or chicken breast or fish fillets, you are missing the most important elements for your connective tissue and your organs. And what are some of the biggest problems you all talk about on this program? Hormone issues, imbalances, blood sugar. That is all regulated by the health of our organs. And if you knew you could take something that directly benefited your liver. Now, we know milk thistle's good and dandelion is good, and there's herbs like bupleurum and burdock root to cleanse your liver. But taking liver by mouth is the best way to give your body what it needs to make a healthy liver. Sorry to all the vegans and the green juice drinkers. The best detoxifying food, the best nourishing food is liver, but we won't eat it.
Yeah, it was interesting what you said, because you were like, some people can't, but the other one was many people won't. And that's, I think, the key for today, because I don't think many people are going to get the taste for eating brains and sweetbread and liver on their plate. And so if you can take it in a little capsule, it solves that problem for today, because we don't have the palate for it. It's icky in people's brain.
Yeah, in my brain it is. And I mean, that's a big reason why we're coming out now with these 3 different supplements. And the one that is kind of the basics is what we call the ancient multi, which is liver with
cordyceps.
Yes.
But we'll get into that later.
Yeah, we'll get into that. But liver in itself, am I right, Jordan, it's like a foundational supplier of things that the human body needs, especially women. And, everyone's walking around these days with like MTHFR mutation, this and that, and low iron, and liver supplies the things we need for these things.
I mean, natural folate that's synthetic.
And B12, woman low, and B12, woman low in iron.
The fat-soluble vitamin A and D is so rich in the liver, right?
Yes, and it is incredible that 1 billion of the 7+ billion people on Earth are deficient in iron, and I think a lot of the other 6 billion have a subclinical deficiency, but because people are concerned about storing iron, and the main reason is because the iron that is typically consumed as a supplement or prescribed is hard on the body, hard on the gut, and causes oxidative stress. When you get iron from the richest source of iron, organs, liver being one of them, and it's combined with B12 and folate, it's actually heart healthy on top of it. Yeah. And another time we'll have to talk about this, but vitamin A retinol has been ignored or even demonized, and it is powerful. And by the way, if you don't believe that liver is important, look at not only indigenous peoples, natives everywhere from Aboriginal Australians to Native Americans. When they hunt an animal, they eat the liver and organs first. Even in the animal kingdom, when a killer whale hunts a shark, they will sometimes eat the liver and only the liver. But this extends to every animal. Dogs, wild coyotes, and wolves, they always eat the organs first. That's what you see. And sadly, when you have a farm, you'll get predation occasionally, and we'll see animal attacks, and that is exactly true. The organs were always prized above everything else, but we, with our palates and our fast, convenient food has to look and taste a certain way, we've completely ignored organs, and we are missing out on a nutrient powerhouse. Just think of the importance of vitamin A, which, by the way, vitamin A retinol is so powerful that retinol is a topical drug for acne because of how anti-inflammatory it can be.
Wow.
Then you've got B12, which is an energy and brain boosting vitamin. Iron literally keeps us moving. A lot of the, I'll say, subclinical depression, particularly in women, is because of low iron. And when you are menstruating, you need even more iron. But I believe menopausal and postmenopausal women, because of the fear of eating red meat and the stigma against egg yolks, it has robbed so much vitality.
Can I ask a question? Because when you said red meat, because so many people think that's their prescription. Okay, if I have low iron, I've got to eat more red meat. But you're saying, no, you got to eat the liver. Like, yes, red meat, but really the king of iron, available in the food is the liver.
Yeah, compared to a steak, and we love a steak too, but compared to a steak, and it can't really compare, right, to liver.
It is 10 to 50 times greater, it being liver in nutrients. Vitamin A is 1,000 times greater. Now listen, red muscle meat is good.
Yeah.
It's got creatine, and it's got glutamine, and it's got carnitine, and it's got some vitamins. But liver is literally a supplemental food. And throughout history, in cultures that didn't know about the science, they would give foods like liver to couples when they were conception age. They would give liver to women after they give birth because of how much blood they've lost. They would consume organs during their menstruation. Like, this ancient wisdom has been lost, and that's what we're supplying.
Wisdom, was it like just an understanding from God to them because they didn't know the science yet? Or because, civilizations were very smart back then when they built the pyramids. Maybe they did know the science and we're having to relearn it. Or was it just an understanding?
Well, think about it, though. I'll chime in. He'll probably have something to say. But, on the night of the Passover, and, they were told to eat the lamb. Of course, it had spiritual significance, but all of it, not one part was to be wasted. And I've always thought about that. And I thought, and you know what? They had to go on a treacherous journey, and God knew it, walking through they wouldn't have had hygiene and all these things that, And they got those organs the night before they started.
They did. And I'm not going to go back to the pyramid comment because I know you all like to be controversial. We could talk about who built the pyramids at one point.
Yeah.
That's a bad joke.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
But when it comes to eating animal nutrition, we need it. But the organs in particular, they are going to make all the difference in the world. And that is the truest sense of a little bit goes a long way, because you don't need to eat a pound or a quarter of a pound or even 2 ounces of liver. But getting that small amount makes a huge difference. And in addition to the vitamins, I didn't mention the minerals. Liver is a great source of zinc.
Yes.
Zinc is critical. We all know about that now for reducing the duration of colds and flus. But when you consume zinc, you need copper, and liver has the perfect balance and is one of nature's richest sources of copper. And I just read a study 2 months ago, copper deficiency leads to constipation. And ironically, and I'll say ironically because people consider meat, as you said earlier, these heavy to digest foods, liver has enzymes that help your body detoxify called PC450. It's a phase 2 detoxification enzyme, and that actual enzyme is in liver. In fact, pancreas has enzymes that break down dead cells in your body and has insulin-like factor to help blood sugar. Kidney, which we recommend and my kids consume every day. I have 5 adopted children, and so I don't know medical histories, but there's definitely allergies and sensitivities. And we live as a family between Middle Tennessee and Alabama, where there's a lot of allergens in the air. So they consume kidney, and kidney has an enzyme that has an antihistamine reaction. And you can't get that from plants. You can get precursors. And I love plants. You just talked about our farm. We have trees. We have all kinds of amazing plants. But there is nothing like animal organs for overall health and vitality. They strengthen your body, and whatever organ you consume, it strengthens the corresponding organ in your body. And you've been told the liver is the most important organ for detoxification and building the blood.
Spleen is incredible for immune health, Jordan.
It is, along with thymus. And that's also something that we recommend.
Oh, our thymus gland.
Yes, the thymus gland controls a lot of the immune system, but so does the spleen. This is known as lymphoid tissue. And it's a shame that we get so much of that removed here in America. Our appendix, believe it or not, is also a very important immune system organ. Our gallbladders are super important for digestion. But back to spleen and thymus. Now, you mentioned sweetbreads. Now, sweetbreads is a name for multiple larger organs like pancreas and thymus in particular. But consuming thymus, you will get peptides that helps to nourish and strengthen your thymus gland. And the spleen is a great producer of blood cells. And so that's why it's really important to have the nutrients in spleen. One of the keys to organs success in supplement form is the peptides, which are proteins found in organs. And there is allegedly Russian research dating back decades that is being translated, which will share something to the effect of, when we consume an organ in a dried or supplement form, those peptides provide a blueprint for the rebuilding and regeneration of your own organs and tissue.
That's amazing, because let's talk about the thymus. I think we get, robust thymus kind of influence in our body. I don't know what age, but as soon as we become of age in our 20s, doesn't it start declining? And am I right that by about the age of 60, basically our thymus is no longer thymus, but
It's like shriveled.
a fatty piece of non-existent organ?
It can be, but I would argue that our bones get like that. We now know that our muscles can get like that. If you think about, let's talk about muscle for a moment. If you're losing 8% of muscle every decade and 16% from 70 to 80, wouldn't similar things be happening to our pituitary gland and our pineal gland and our thymus and our spleen? So they absolutely do regress if they are overworked. And boy, are they overworked today.
So what we do for muscle, right, is to take in the muscle meat. And what we do for spleen is take in the spleen. And what we do for our thymus, take the thymus.
Like versus like.
Like supports
and for
like.
our brain,
absolutely.
we take brain.
Yes, you do. Now, people freak out about this because of BSE,
bovine,
what we would call spongiform encephalopathy, but we call mad cow disease. People got really scared, but brain has been a delicacy in every culture for thousands of years, and brain contains neural stimulating factors. And I'm not saying you go out and consume it. Now, I will say, you talk about supplements. I had this really cool idea once to combine lion's mane, mushroom, and brain and call it lion's brain. I mean, isn't that so cool? Anyway, that's not a real supplement.
Hey,
but.
back on, because we touched on mushroom, we did want to make our organ supplements a little bit unique and different. And so we did have some mushrooms thrown in there, which interestingly are a fruiting body. They have they're
like an organ,
a plant organ, because they produce these seeds.
The spores.
Yes, well, mushrooms are not plants. And growing up, I remember people would say, oh, you got your broccoli, your cauliflower, your green beans, and your mushrooms. They are not vegetables. Mushrooms are part of a kingdom unto themselves, according to biology. There are 6 kingdoms, if you remember 5th grade science. A lot of us don't.
I don't.
Fungi are, I would say, a kingdom that shares characteristics between humans and plants. So you've got certain compounds in a mushroom that would be similar to what's in our skin, but then you have compounds that are similar to plant fibers. They are translators from one kingdom to the other. They break down, they bioaccumulate, which is why you want organic mushrooms, because they suck in almost everything that is in their environment. But for thousands of years, every culture in the world has had fungi or mushrooms, and it's probably more appropriately called fungi, that help with endurance, that fight cancer. And I'm talking about people will say, well, oh, turkey tail's the best, or reishi's the best, or chaga's the best. Every part of the world has fungi or mushrooms that they prize, and they are a component of what I would say are these forgotten superfoods, just like organs. People are like, what is a reishi and how do you eat it? And, I see these weird things in the corner of the grocery store, but I never buy them. In America, we don't use fungi. We probably consume the least of it out of any culture in the world. And in Asia, they consume it in soups.
Yes.
They consume it in medicines. They consume it in skincare. They feed it to their animals. And I first started learning about and formulating with mushrooms in 1999. I had a grandmother who I loved dearly who was diagnosed with cancer, and I was looking for certain compounds that the best you could call them would be healing sugars. Now they're known as polysaccharides or polysaccharide peptides. And I looked at a chemical chart, and every mushroom that I could find had these compounds. And so I created a formula in 1999. My grandmother's name was Rose Menlo, and I named it RM-10 for the 10 mushrooms that I made for my grandmother. And she had an incredible result. She was on the front cover of a health magazine, beating cancer at 80. This was 25 years ago. And it was amazing. So I have been studying, formulating, and now growing mushrooms myself, meaning my team, for the last 25 plus years. And they are very important. And just like organs, we don't consume enough of them. Now, sure, you could consume a portobello, you can consume a button mushroom, maybe an oyster mushroom, and those have good qualities if they're organic. But we're talking about what traditional Chinese medicine referred to as medicinal mushrooms. Reishi, when it's properly prepared, is almost as hard as a rock. You almost have to chip it off, and it's bitter, which stimulates the liver. You wouldn't want to eat it.
I wonder if it stimulates GLP-1 and things like incretin hormones because of the bitter compounds.
That's a great question. And mushrooms have all kinds of compounds. I have not heard from any mycologist, which is a mushroom scientist, on what mushrooms could help with ghrelin and leptin and hunger hormones like that. But they are amazing. They're known for their immune system boosting properties. You mentioned cordyceps. Cordyceps has some unique history. Number one, it was discovered in the Himalayas, 14,000 feet up, when yak were multiplying rapidly or reproducing rapidly in a very difficult environment. They were eating what was called as caterpillar fungi or cordyceps. When it was determined that this virility could also be achieved in humans, the emperor made it illegal if you found cordyceps to consume it, you must bring it to him. It was a compound that was literally owned by the emperor in Tibet and other regions. And fast forward all the way to the 80s, the Chinese Olympic team won more gold medals than they ever had in any other Olympics. And they, at that time, gave credit to cordyceps.
Now we have the cordyceps in with our liver in our ancient
because it's such an energy bringer. It just brings energy. Also, it's like you said, not only is it for fertility, it's an aphrodisiac. I mean, what do they call it? The Himalayan Viagra.
They do.
They do. So it's incredible. But you know what? You touched on something. You've been able to do a lot of regenerative growing, and we're so excited because some of the things in our supplements we are able to source from you in the ancient way, not just organic soil, but we're talking regenerative soil, which is something
rich topsoil,
completely different. And that's what the ancients had. We modern people don't have that anymore. You're doing something that no one really has been able to do. And so it's really exciting.
Super exciting. But we want to touch on too, before we go, because time is running, on the other supplement that has organs in too.
Oh, the gut.
The gut health
of course,
which is huge. And we have pancreas in there, and we have duodenum is how I say it. But how are you meant to pronounce it?
Duodenum.
Yes.
It is the top of the small intestine. And duodenum is really important for digestion, produces digestive enzymes, and stomach may sound gross to you, but all original cheese and curds in the Bible was made by putting milk in the ancient water bottle. And guess what the ancient water bottle was?
The stomach.
An intestinal sac of an animal.
Yeah.
That's what they carried
because
around
of
and
the
drank
enzymes
from.
that
Well, you heard them say, I needed a skin of water, right? They gave me a skin of water.
Yeah.
Can you imagine those water bottles got kind of smelly? Yeah. But the enzymes and the bacteria in stomach and duodenum, and there's varying amounts. Duodenum has less, stomach has more. They impact the gut, but you see immediate results. Now, I'll give you an example. So I have a small dog. She is 7-ish pounds. And when I feed her a raw food mix that has stomach and duodenum in it, it is an instant change in her digestion, almost with it. She'll have twice the amount of bowel movements, and they're well formed. I know we're being a little gross
let's
here,
go
but I'm sure
there.
you all
we
talk
like
about
to
it all
get
the time.
gross on our
But
show.
I'm talking about immediate. And the fact that stomach and duodenum are not consumed more frequently in digestive formulations or in food is a shame, because you can't get in an isolated extracted supplement what you can get from consuming the entrails or the organs. And these are a part of our modern day diet around the world, but not in America. As I mentioned, kishka is what you say guts in Yiddish or Jewish slang. Haggis is that Scottish, the repulsive food, but chitlins was consumed by people here of African American descent very commonly. Those are all digestive parts of animals, and they supply a great complement of probiotics, enzymes, and peptides. If you want to rebuild your gut, consume those building blocks.
It is such a shame. Just our modern diet is so cleaned up to the point of it just doesn't have any robustness to nurture our bodies, because we as a family love to go to the international food stores in Nashville, and my children call them the stink stores because they don't smell like the soap aisles and the detergents.
Clorox.
Like the normal American stores, they have this very sterile smell. But when you go into the stink stores, you see all of these entrails just outlined out, there, and then all the different mushrooms everywhere. You see a lot of the things that we've been talking about, because other cultures still prize them and still eat them, and they have better health, way better health.
Can I ask you something too? Because I feel like out of a lot of people, and there's a lot of so-called gut experts out there today, influencers on the internet, but you have actually had a lot to do with probiotics. With your first company, I think that you brought the soil probiotic to kind of the space.
Oh, and I have the scars to prove it. It's interesting when you introduce a concept that is different than what is the norm, especially when you're 23 years old, how that can affect you. But my life was so transformed by consuming soil-based probiotics, and it made so much sense. And all the probiotics in the market, I tried years before. I remember the leading brand of probiotics when I was battling Crohn's disease. I consumed, you're not going to believe this, 6 bottles a day of these 3 products combined. I'm not talking, and then I took it every which way you could, and it didn't work. And that doesn't mean they're useless per se, but when I realized that our soils are depleted and they're missing minerals and microbes, and that those organisms were what could make me rejuvenated within my gut, it made perfect sense after trying 30 different brands of probiotics. And for the last 20, now it's over 30 years, I've been consuming soil-based organisms every day. Wow. When I travel overseas, I double my dose before, during, and after.
Wow.
I just don't know what I would do without them, but I don't know what our plants would do without them. Mm-hmm. I made a joke. We had a baby water buffalo whose first-time mother didn't have good mothering instincts, and we proudly proclaimed that we are the #1 brand of soil-based organisms to baby water buffalo because, and part of the formula we fed her was soil-based organisms.
Now,
there's something primal about it.
Well, no, we have humate in our gut formula too, but
that's the minerals.
Yeah, we also have soil-based probiotics, and when we were formulating this, we were really like, okay, probiotics are such an iffy subject. Like, do they cause SIBO? Do they make it worse? Should you take them? But when it comes to soil, from what I've understood, and tell me if I'm right, when it comes to soil-based probiotics, they do not have this, the tendency to accelerate SIBO. In fact, they work against it. Am I right about that?
I fully believe that.
Yeah.
The soil-based organisms, which are characterized as usually bacillus, whereas the normal refrigerated probiotics are usually lactobacillus or bifidobacteria. And here, let me give you one warning. The refrigerator is a great place for people to buy probiotics at health food stores and grocery stores. But if you need a probiotic that's refrigerated, what happens when it gets into your 98.6 degree body? I used to say that if you want a refrigerated probiotic to work, you need to live in a refrigerator. So maybe the Eskimos are in the igloos, but you need something hardy. So these soil-based organisms are impervious to heat. You could even microwave them.
Wow.
And about 60% would survive. Wow. They have a shield around them that keeps them protected so they can get to your gut. And best of all, when they get to your gut, they create a shield against pathogenic germs. So it is something that I would never be without. I consume them morning and evening. You look throughout my history from Garden of Life to Ancient Nutrition, soil-based organisms have been created and introduced ever since. And now people are starting to get it. They're realizing that, oh, these probiotics maybe should go in kombucha, or maybe they should go in frozen yogurt. But the right doses of these probiotics, I would say, need to be consumed in supplements because our gut is so damaged. And even though we're recommending Bacillus and Saccharomyces, not necessarily Lactobacillus, when you consume these soil-based organisms, they provide an environment for your own Lactobacillus and Bifidobacteria to grow. You can't transplant Lactobacillus effectively by mouth. But when you take bacillus, I call them your internal army. These soil-based organisms, they go in there, they create a hospitable environment for your good germs, and they fight the bad germs. They turn a damaged gut into a healthy gut. And boy, do they work. People are waking up to them, but it's been an uphill battle for the last nearly 30 years. But now I think the evidence is unequivocal, and it is tilted in the way of soil-based organisms.
So excited because we have them in our gut formula.
It's like you started off, you created Garden of Life, and it was all about the soil-based thing that turned your health around. But now you're the soil guy. You are making soil on this earth. You ever think about that, Jordan? You went from hey, soil is healing me, guys, to hey, I'm creating soil here. Yeah,
it's super exciting and full circle.
But when I was sick
and I was living in a motorhome, I left that part out, in California, I didn't have a generator. This was an old motorhome. And I grew up in the suburbs in Florida. I didn't know what a motorhome was. But as I was living there, breathing in my ocean air, parking illegally at night, and having to get fresh food every day because all I had was a cooler with ice, I realized at that time that raw dairy was an item that was controversial. Even in California where it was legal, they were always battling to get it off the shelf. And if I showed up one day and didn't have my raw dairy, I didn't know what would happen. My kefir, my raw cream, my raw cottage cheese, then my pasture-raised beef and my eggs and my sourdough grains. At that point, when I was living in a $2,500 1968 Chevrolet motorhome, I realized that I needed to have a hand in raising and growing my own food one day. I didn't have any money. I had a need and a dream, and I knew I wasn't alone. And I knew at that point I was getting well. I was going to be healed. And one day I would have a family, and they would need this food. And one day I would talk about it to others and share my testimony, and they would need this food. So the farming was a little bit, I would say, prophetic from 1996 and 1997. It took some time. My first farm land I acquired in 2009, so it took some time. But if anyone's listening, a little bit off topic, but if you have a dream that God put in your heart, because you can't see it now, doesn't mean God hasn't put it in store for you. And that's where Hebrews 11:1 comes in, because I knew I needed this food, and now I'm able and blessed to produce it. But you're exactly right, Pearl. Soil has been a thread throughout my life for quite some time now. And here's what's interesting for you Bible believers. We often quote in Genesis that man was created from the dust of the earth. It's not true. Man was created from the topsoil. Man And our components, we are born, Adam came out of the ground. He was born out of topsoil. And when we die, that's where we go. I can quote the Lion King, which is a lot less theological, but it's all part of the circle of life.
Yeah.
But topsoil is, and I'm getting chills now, is called humus. It's not the Mediterranean dip we put on our pita bread.
Goodness.
Humus is the same Latin term that means human. How are we not told this?
Wow.
We don't come from dust. We come from topsoil, from humus. And you talked about humate.
Yes,
What
which is in our
humate?
gut formula. Yeah.
Humate is a mineral extract from humus. It is the human mineral. And that's never been said. That just came to me. Like, think about it.
That's amazing.
Humate, the human mineral. But that God knew all of this ahead of time. And translations can change some things. You talked about your mother having some prophetic insight for me, which I'm looking forward to, about some things we're working on.
Can I tease that?
Let's tease it.
Okay, so, we've been familiar with Jordan Rubin. Many of you may have been for the Maker's Diet. And then it went for Perfect Food America.
Perfect Weight America.
Yeah,
Yep,
Perfect
you're
Weight
right.
America. We loved that. We read that and had all your products. And then it was Beyond Organics, right?
Yep.
And you did all
our
of the
farm and our food.
Yeah. And now the regenerative agriculture. But he is coming out. You're sitting on this new book to be released maybe in a year.
Less than a year.
Biblia
August,
Diet,
yes.
which I'm so excited to get my hands on. And he has something coming out literally that has been super, super exciting to us. And we've been starting to partake of it. We can't tell you what it is, but get that Biblia Diet because he has something in there that is so part of healing the nations in the future.
I mean, it's kind of weird doing it in secret, but it's pretty exciting
powerful
for the whole world, Jordan.
Yes. Well, and you all and your excitement level is heartwarming to me because the Lord spoke this to me 5 years ago. My wife got a tease of it, which stimulated what the Lord spoke to me. And I've been quietly helping people with all kinds of health challenges and recommending this. And it is, I really feel the ultimate part of my legacy. And I say that, I guess, with zero humility whatsoever. But what I mean to say is it's what I want to be a part of more than anything else, because we haven't even talked about on this podcast. We'll have to do it another time. My Crohn's disease battle and God's subsequent healing me was amazing.
Yeah.
But later in my life, I dealt with an incurable cancer journey.
I didn't want to bring it up
that
just
God
in case
healed
you
me.
didn't.
But that will be for another program.
Well, because we're going to have you back when your new book, Biblio Diet, comes out.
Yes.
Definitely.
And we're going to discuss that. But, we've been just so honored that we sat at your farm that day and you installed in us some of these ways, like, hey, girls, just like
We're all into cutting edge science, but
let's
bring
bring
back
back
the
the
ancients.
ancients. And you steered us down a path, that got us thinking of, like, if we're going to do this right, and we're about healing women and families, we need to bring back the ancient ways. And so, you were a big influence
What
on
is that
us.
scripture that's coming to mind now?
The
You'll be able
ancient
to
paths.
say it. Yes.
And it's so cool because my wife
Don't
and I were
remove the
walking
boundaries, the
2
ancient-
days ago, and she
Yeah.
said, gosh, it'd be so cool if someone could get the name Ancient Paths. Have you looked
Yeah.
into that? And she brought that up as well. And in Romans 8, the Bible talks about God waiting for his children. The earth is groaning for us to remove the curse of degeneration and bring about regeneration. And I really think that has to do with people and planet. And because of the term climate change and all of the stigma around that, some of us Bible believers have stayed away from environmental stewardship. And I love what some of the new regime and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he's talking about regenerating soils. That's what we can all agree with. Let's not talk about, some of us believe certain people are changing the climate, and some believe our efforts to build and all of our chemicals are changing the climate. But what I do know is this: we are robbing our earth of topsoil or humus, which is making us less human. So in a way, becoming an environmental steward and caring for our planet makes you more human. Why? Because you're building more humus. And that's what we're trying to do. But what I shared with the two of you, there's really probably less than 100 people who I've talked to about this, because the Lord has had me sit on this message. And now that I see what's happened politically, et cetera, I think I know why. I think there's going to be a time where not only a certain political party or a period of time is known for bringing about healing. I want it to be a message that God gave, not that it was a podcaster or that it was a lifelong politician or even a president that people are very appreciative of. But God needs to get the credit because all of this is hidden in plain sight. And when God spoke to me 5 years ago about a path forward for people with the most challenging diseases, or for those of us who just want to live long and better and connect the dots from Genesis and the tree of life and what did Adam and Eve eat and the fall of man and what about Revelation 22? That's all coming to fruition. So literally fruition, fruit. And we will talk about it first here on this potty.
I do want to say that when you said for God to get the glory, for people that are listening and think, oh, maybe it's just another thing that's going to be expensive and only, a certain few can get it who have the money for supplements. No, this thing is for the everyday person and it's for everyone who has a backyard.
We'll teach you how to make it. And if you don't want to go forage and make it yourself, we'll have it for you. And one thing I've told you all, and I know we're jumping way ahead here, but we're going to bring this out, and anyone who has a need that can't afford it, they will get it regardless.
Yeah.
So it's something that God has made in abundance for all of us. And I think all of us have been looking for this answer to longevity, to these diseases that are robbing our loved ones. And I've dealt with cancer personally. Your family has dealt with it. We've all seen it rear its ugly head. And it doesn't have to be that way. If eternity is without disease, why can't we start living that on earth as it is in heaven?
Yeah. And I mean, truly your heart, when we talk off camera, Jordan's heart is really to heal the nations, and as is ours. And we love just getting alongside people who truly their hearts are for people to find healing, like you experienced in your own life, and is sharing with others, and our new book is Trim Healthy Wisdom. And wisdom, what is wisdom? It is gaining new knowledge, of course, but it is going back to those ancient paths, because God is wisdom and his ways are the ancient ways. And so I'm kind of...
Well, he's also the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. And that's why I love that this new revelation that Jordan has is from Genesis and it's in Revelation.
But the new is the old.
Yes.
Isn't the new the old? And
Absolutely.
that's what we've been talking about here today. We think we're so modern, but we've forgotten the old ways and it's hurting us. So
in every area.
When we get wisdom, we get understanding, and it all comes back to the truth. There's no truth without it, without him. And so this has been such a great discussion. I know we've been teasing things here, but Jordan's not ready to yet reveal all, and he'll do that on another podcast. But I mean, I feel like the discussion about organs and all that was exciting.
Oh yeah, super exciting.
Because I'm an organ consumer now, and I never was.
Yeah, and I don't even have to taste it.
All these things we think we will never do. I was never a kefir maker, and I am now. But these are the ancient things that have made me personally healthier.
Our grandparents and great-grandparents were a lot wiser than we give them credit for. And I do think there's a place for modern medicine and modern agriculture, but we've gotten much too much of it. And it's time for us to use some logic, common sense, and remember what our granny taught us. And everything we said today, that is exactly what it is.
Exactly. And, of course, we're talking about, hey, we're coming out with supplements. Well, guess what? If you can't afford supplements, you can eat liver. There's palatable ways.
You go to the stink store, people.
I mean, I don't love it, but there are ways to make it. So
and you can get mushrooms in the store. It's just people don't choose necessarily to prepare them the way they need to.
We forget they're there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like what our dad always said, to bring some humor. He's like, people these days are educated beyond their common sense.
Yeah. Beyond their intelligence. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jordan. We so appreciate. We can't wait to have you back.
This has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
It's an honor.